Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Friday, August 9th. Today is day 308 since the attacks by Hamas on the south of Israel on October 7th. The White House issued a joint statement today with two other nations, the nations of Egypt and Qatar. From their briefing room, the statement said it's time to bring immediate relief, both to the long-suffering people of Gaza, as well as the long-suffering hostages and their families. The time has come to conclude the ceasefire and hostages and detainees release deal. The three of us and our teams have worked tirelessly over many months to forge a framework agreement that is now on the table with only the details of implementation left to conclude. This agreement is based on the principles outlined by President Biden on May 31st, 2024, and endorsed by the UN Security Council Resolution 2735. There's no further time to waste, nor excuses from any party for further delay. It's time to release hostages, begin the ceasefire, and implement this agreement. The statement goes on and says that the states have called on both sides, meaning the state of Israel and Hamas, to resume the urgent discussions on Thursday in either Doha or Cairo to close any remaining gaps and commence implementation of the deal. It's signed by President Joe Biden of the US, the President of Egypt, El-Sisi, and the Emir of the State of Qatar, His Holiness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. And honestly, I mean, yes, of course, it's time. It's time. We've been saying it's time since October. This statement coming out saying that, President Biden, it's time is like saying nothing, but that's great. That statement came out from the White House today. I wanted to be sure to let you know. Other things that have happened in the news in the last 24 hours. One of the things Churches for Middle East Peace is committed to is standing up against hatred, against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, against any type of bigotry. And it's deeply disconcerting the way that Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, the hatred and bigotry that has increased around the world. We've been talking about what's been happening in the UK last weekend and over this past week. And there have been reports lately about actions that are being taken on college campuses against Hillel programs, Jewish programs on college campuses. And I was learning about some of those this week. I don't agree with much of the information that the Anti-Defamation League puts out, but they did put out an article talking about Hillels this past week. And I wanted to call our attention to some of the things that are happening. In a photograph, there are signs that say it's right to rebel, Hillel, go to hell. And some of the hatred in terms of signage, in terms of language that's being used on extremes on all sides is just really not constructive. And really, we need to stand up against it. We have to stand up against anti-Semitism. We have to stand up against hatred towards Muslims. Since October 7th, Hillels on campuses have been among the most frequent targets of activists who are against the actions of the state of Israel. Jewish students and Hillel staff have received threatening emails and phone calls. Buildings have been vandalized, tagged with graffiti, and Hillel-sponsored events have been protested. Student groups that are critical of actions of the state of Israel have launched campaigns demanding that Hillels be banned entirely from universities. Many of these incidents include references to the Israel-Hamas war, engaging in classic anti-Semitic practices, and holding Jewish people around the world accountable for the actions of the state of Israel. So I wanted to be sure to mention that. There also has been a lot in the news this past week about Vice President Harris and how she does not support an arms embargo on Israel. A top advisor clarified after one of her campaign speeches this week in Michigan. She had two exchanges with Palestinian supporters. One was cordial, one was confrontational. This was reported on in the New York Times. Confrontationally, protesters in Detroit shouted, "Kamala, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide." Harris responded, "I'm speaking now." But as the disruption continued, her patience ran thin. You know what Ms. Harris said with sudden force and a resolve of a parent in a driver's seat, according to the New York Times? If you want Donald Trump to win, then you can say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking. Ultimately, the protesters were dismissed from the room, and the article goes on to say that she kind of had a stare down with them. Vice President Kamala Harris's national security advisor was clarifying because in conversations, apparently Vice President Harris had with certain people who are critical of what they identify as genocide in Gaza. Personally, that is my perspective. Churches for Middle East Peace has agreed, our 35-member communions agree to the prevention of genocide and that what is happening in Gaza could be potential genocide, as says the International Criminal Court. But Harris had agreed to have a conversation about listening to a group who is calling for arms embargoes on Israel. And so there was a question of her listening to a group that is calling for an arms embargo. Is she open to that possibility? And her national security advisor was very, very clear in saying no, that is not her position. And she does not support an arms embargo on Israel. Phil Gordon is her national security advisor. He clarified that she will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. She does not support an arms embargo on Israel. She will continue to work to protect the civilians of Gaza and to uphold international humanitarian law. We would argue that U.S. arms are being used in violation of international humanitarian law. And so an arms embargo, until it can be proven that Israel is using arms according to international law, would be a requirement. According to the Telegraph, Iran's president is attempting to dissuade generals in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who want to strike Tel Aviv and instead support targeting Israeli assets in Iran's neighboring countries. The Tasnim news agency affiliated with the Revolutionary Guards reported today that Deputy Chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's order to harshly punish Israel will be carried out. A U.S. official told the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. warned Iran of serious consequences to its economy and new government if it does launch a major attack on Israel. Israel said that it will send a negotiating team to Doha or Cairo on August 15th. That was in response to the US, Qatar, and Egypt. They're announcing the framework, that letter that I started with. Sources privy to the details of Hamas's demands told Haaretz that Hamas demands the release of the senior Fatah leader, Marwan Barghouti, who's been in prison for more than 20 years, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine's Secretary General Ahmad Sadat in the first phase of the deal. The IDF on Friday said it launched a ground operation in Gaza in Khan Yunis, the third such maneuver since the beginning in October, after the army received intelligence about militants and infrastructure there. According to the IDF, over 30 sites were attacked and several militants were killed. The Israeli army said that an officer from the IDF's Nahal Brigade was seriously wounded in Gaza. And as of yesterday's numbers, the death toll in Gaza is at least 39,699 Palestinians killed, 91,722 wounded. The IDF said its jets struck Hezbollah's headquarters in Lebanon, as well as a rocket launcher in a southern village from which rockets had been fired onto northern Israel overnight into Friday. The Israeli army said it killed 2 Hezbollah operatives in southern Lebanon earlier this morning, and that 2 were spotted leaving a Hezbollah military facility in Nakora and were killed in an airstrike. An Israeli attributed airstrike also reportedly killed 2 Hamas members, including a senior member of the group's military wing, Samar al-Hajj, in a car on the edge of Lebanon's port city of Sidon Friday night. And the municipality of a northern Israeli city of Kiryat Shimona said today that 15 rockets were fired on that area, damaging homes, a vehicle, and starting a fire. The U.S. called on citizens in Lebanon to leave immediately as soon as they are able to book any tickets available to them and to prepare shelters for an extended period of time, according to a statement from the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. After far-right National Security Minister Ben Gvir intervened, Israeli police gave right-wing activists permission to hold an event for Israeli settlers for calling for Israeli settlements in Gaza near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, even though refusal had initially been given. I did not hear if there were escalations around that event, but that happened today. Mikhail Samara, a 28-year-old Israeli, died of wounds today after being severely wounded by an air defense interceptor responding to a Hezbollah drone. United Airlines said yesterday that it has suspended all of its flights to Tel Aviv for the foreseeable future in order to resume safety for its customers and crew. And the Eshkol Regional Council in South Israel said 2 rockets exploded in open areas on the Israeli border communities of Kisafim and In Hashlosha. The U.S. Central Command had landed in Israel yesterday for the second time in a week, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. They held situation assessments with the Chief of Staff and the Air Force Commander, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. The U.S. Central Command also announced yesterday the arrival of F-22 Raptors in the Middle East as a part of U.S. force posture changes in the region to mitigate the possibility of regional escalations by Iran or its proxies. There was further movement in the appeal of 5 soldiers accused of abusing the Palestinian from Gaza who was held at the State Haman detention facility. They will stay under arrest until Sunday. Houthis, the U.S. Central Command said that they destroyed 2 Houthi anti-ship cruise missiles and 1 Houthi ground station in Yemen, as well as a Houthi uncrewed surface vessel in the Red Sea. And according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Israel attacked a military depot near a military airport in Homs in central Syria. A former employee of World Vision wrote these words to the world about what's happening in Gaza recently. As well as the people of Gaza, they inhale gunpowder falling from the sky, shells made by Israeli, American, British, German, and the French, and others. They expel dust from their chests. Gaza's people are literally dying from everything. Patients are more than 1,300,000 patients. Martyrs, wounded, prisoners, and missing people are 200,000 or more. There's no groundwater. It is all polluted. There's no potable water. There's no food, especially in the north. There are no clothes. There are no accommodations. There are no schools. There are no mosques. There are no universities. There are no hospitals. There are no medications. To those living with consciences, to those who love humanity, please, please do not let Gaza be destroyed. Do not let its people be killed. Enough death, enough pain. Please keep us in your prayers. Amen.